Welcome to the channel. Thank you everyone for tuning in. Join me today guys for a critical comparison. Yes, another one of those videos. So in front of me I've got two watches which, homaging exactly the same watch, and they look pretty much similar. And what I'm going to do today is break it down element by element and compare that to the price to identify ultimately which is the more better value for money watch. Now, the two watches I've got here, very recognizable. YouTube is full of amazing reviews for both pieces, and let's quickly tell you what they are. So on my left, I've got the Pagani design PD1661. Now this is the updated version to the Pagani design I did perhaps last year, in the early days of my channel. And that was the 43mm version. So this is the 40mm version. I got this in because I was really interested how they had downsized it. And I'll tell you what, it looks good. It looks a lot better than it was on the 43mm diameter. On my right, very popular, I've got the version 3 San Martin Water Ghost, they call it, but of course it's a sub Homage. Again, very popular watch, and it's been reviewed very thoroughly on YouTube and by myself. So let's break these watches down. Let's see what is really different and what is ultimately the better value for money watch. How different is the San Martin in quality to a very cheap, very affordable budget watch. So let's talk about the differences between the two watches I've got here. There is virtually not a lot different between them. So let's start off with specifications. Now both watches have got sapphire crystal, ceramic bezel inserts, full 316L stainless steel construction, down to the bracelet, solid in links, screwed in links, flip lock clasps. Same thing with the San Martin. Of course, you got differences in aesthetics, in looks, and types of finishes on the watch. They both run the Seiko Epson NH35 movement, which is a 24 jewel movement with hack and wind functions with a date complication, and the beat at 6 ticks per second. So very reliable movements. Always forget to do this wrist check. I'm wearing the Steinhardt Ocean 1 titanium 500. Dimensions: the San Martin, you got a diameter of 40mm, the exact same as the Pagani. You've got a thickness of 12.7 on the San Martin, and you've got a thickness of 12.6 on the Pagani. So a 0.1 mil difference, which is negligible. Then the lug to lug, the San Martin is roughly 48mm, and the Pagani is 47.5, just under by 0.5 mil. The only difference here is the water resistance. The Pagani is 100 meters and the San Martin is rated to 200 meters. So in dimensions, 0.1, maximum 0.5 mil of a difference, and in specifications, literally zero difference. So let's go ahead, look at this watch in further detail. We've got to go a bit closer now to identify where do these watches differ and what are you paying for. So let's talk about the price before we go in there. The Pagani will cost you £55 from AliExpress. So that is very, very affordable, and it can accommodate almost everyone's budget. Now the San Martin Submariner Homage, currently it's sitting at around 150, but when they did come out, they were around the 170 to 180 pound mark. So there is a massive difference between them in price, and that's the whole point of these reviews, is to see if the watch actually justifies the price, at least in the world of AliExpress and homages. So let's go ahead and take a close-up look at the dials. Let's go ahead and look at the differences between the dials on both watches. In order to do that, let's in fact look at the similarities, because you'll be surprised how similar they actually are. Both dials have a sun ray or sunburst type of effect. The Pagani has a black sunburst, which has been done to a very nice level, and the San Martin has a green sun ray sunburst effect on the dial. Now both have applied and printed features. Now when we look at the hour markers, the indices, both are using applied indices with polished edges. Both use printing at the 6 o'clock. There is a lot more text on the Pagani, of course, and on the logo, Pagani uses a printed logo at the 12 o'clock, whereas San Martin uses the applied hexagonal logo. Both don't have a date frame present, and they've also got a printed minute track. Now between the two, in terms of quality visually, what can I see? I don't see any difference. I don't see one being any better than the other. Both have very good quality of printing. It's very crisp, legible, no printing errors, no splatters, etc. All the minute track is printed to a very high level. When we look at the hands, both are polished Mercedes style hands. Now that is where you will see a visual difference, is the handset on the San Martin is slightly thinner and just slightly pointier, but both do have a slight bit of chamfering clearly visible on, more so on the hour marker. There's a very, sorry, on the minute hand, there's a very subtle chamfer present on the hour marker, if I'm not mistaken. But both handsets are very similar, just a slight bit of design difference between the two. The main difference that you will see on both dials, in fact, is actually going to be the lume. Now, the hour markers on the San Martin are slightly off-white, and I'd say that's down to the amount of layers that have been applied off the BGW9, whereas the Pagani is a lot paler in color, but it does match the bezel insert a bit better. Now, between them, like I said, it is very, very difficult. And this round, I will give it to the San Martin purely because it's got an applied logo and I know it's got better lume. We'll see the lume in the next shot. Okay, let's compare the lume on both watches. Now, have a look. I've not hit either of these watches with the UV lamp. I've just used the natural light around me. It is daytime when I'm doing this video, but I've just darkened out the room. I think with the UV lamp, it'll make it slightly a bit more difficult to determine which one is a bit brighter. Now, the lume pip on the Pagani design is absolutely perfect, which is strange because the dial one, it's quite dull, right? It is BGW9, it's quite dull. It could be a lot better. Bam, in comes the San Martin, destroys the Pagani on this one. Lume, dial, hands, everything is a beautiful, cool ice blue. Totally dismantles it and destroys it without a shadow of a doubt. Okay, let's turn our attention to the crystal and the bezel, etc. So the crystal on the Pagani, flat sapphire crystal. We've also got a applied Cyclops magnification. I don't know, maybe around 1.5. And exactly the same with the San Martin, flat sapphire crystal with the magnification, Cyclops at the date. It's slightly, I'd say it's a bit better on the San Martin. It's a bit more visible. There's less distortion on the date. Both fit and finish are spot on. So I haven't given a difference to either or. They both score equally when it comes to the crystal. Now let's look at the bezel. So bezel inserts, of course, very similar. I think the font on the San Martin is just slightly thinner. But again, both are very similar. The main difference on the bezel insert is, of course, the pip at the 12 o'clock. So with the Pagani, you've got this applied pip, which is fine. It's on a lot of watches. It's on a lot of top quality homages as well. The San Martin have gone a step further and they've done this subset pip on the bezel insert, which gives it a really good profile. And I think this is the preferred option. And personally as well, for myself, I really do like this. I prefer this. So there's a bit of value add, something which arguably would have cost more. So on the bezel insert, San Martin does get a point on that. Now let's look at the actual functionality of the bezel. This is where, you know, there is going to be the most difference. So with the Pagani, you've actually got a 60-click unidirectional bezel. You do have a bit of play, but Pagani is consistent with this bezel. You know, you always have play, they always have bezel issues. And so let's listen to that. Now, of course, it doesn't align properly. Like I said, there's a bit of play in it. It does sound a bit tinny, but it's very smooth. It's, you know, you can live with it. You can absolutely live with it. Needless to say, you got a full click worth of back play on the bezel. Is there any bounce? No bounce, but there is a fair bit of movement. It also actually feels a bit lighter, but the actual finish on the bezel is absolutely fine. There's no cause for concern there. You've got this scalloped sub-style bezel, fully brushed. There's no sharp edges. It's been machined to a very good level. Okay, now how does that compare to the San Martin Water Ghost? Now, first of all, alignment is perfect. Just listen to that difference. A lot more precise, 120 click unidirectional bezel. Lines up really well. There's no play in the bezel, actually very solid. But when it comes to the machining, more or less the same. We've got these scallops, sub-style bezel insert, bezel. Just a touch edgier, but I'd say that's probably a bit more refined. It feels denser as a material, bit more solid than the Pagani, but definitely way better in terms of movement, side play, up and down, more or less zero back play. That I'm actually forcing it, but you will have a bit of movement, you have a bit of play, but nothing actually there. So clear winner between the two, which is the San Martin sub Homage. But obviously this doesn't equate to the price difference, so we'll have to continue digging. We have to go ahead and look at the case. Now, looking at the cases for both watches, you know, there's hardly any difference. So they both have a brushed A face, so linear brushing down to the lug tips, and even the actual bracelet itself is brushed on either side with the center polished links. Now you'll see a fully brushed bracelet, but the exact same finishing on this San Martin. Linear brushing. Now, is there a difference between the brushing? Not to my eyes, there isn't. We turn the watch on its side. Polished sides, exactly the same as the Pagani. Now the case shape, there's a very slight difference in it. This is slightly bit more spread out, but that accounts for, obviously, there's a 0.5mm difference between the lug to lug on both watches. So slight, very, very slight shape difference, ever so slight, but both are done exactly the same. Polishing on either side, polishing on either side. Now let's have a closer look at the crown guards. Now there's a slight difference on the crown guards. The ones on the Pagani do come out a bit more, they're a bit thicker, whereas these are just a bit slimmer in terms of the crown. So the crown's got some machining on there. As mentioned, it's a signed crown. Rotation's good, the grip is decent. The crown action on these Paganis, there's no issue on there at all. Screws down, absolutely fine, good threads. So the crown on the San Martin, same thing. The grip is slightly better, but that's ever so slight. Signed crown on both, so they both have had equal machining done on there, and so there's no difference. So between the cases, I've not judged any difference at all. The only difference that I have judged is the fact that it comes at 200 meters of water resistance, and I've scored it a point higher than the Pagani. Now there is another size difference which I noticed on the bezel. Now A face, you can tell there's a very slight difference between the bezel sizes. That's because the Submariner Homage from San Martin has a diameter on the bezel of around 40.4 millimeters, and the Pagani design is 40.6. So very, very subtle difference of 0.2mm in size on the actual bezel. The case dimensions were more or less exactly the same, except the lug to lug, but the finishing, I don't see any difference. But the only obviously difference on the back of the case is one's a closed case back and one is an exhibition case back. We're not going to look at what they're writing. There's nothing clearly different between both. If anything, the Pagani should get a point for the case back because it's had more work done to it, whereas the San Martin is just brushed, kind of a standard Rolex style case back. Okay, so a very tough call there, not much between them. And now let's look at the bracelets of both watches. Now this is why I think there will be a bit of a difference, but let me put it to you this way. In hand, they both feel the same. There's no difference between them. If anything, the links on the Pagani feel a bit smoother. What I look at when I look at bracelet is the overall feel and finish. I don't really look at, for example, if it's just got you know, a fancy clasp that does it. No, this is what you feel when you wear the watch on your wrist, and it is a lot smoother on the edges of the links than in fact on the San Martin. However, I'd say the San Martin is finished a lot better. It's slightly thicker. Now the link thickness, I believe, is 3.4 on the San Martin, and it's 3.2 millimeters on the Pagani. They both have screw-in links. Of course, the Pagani comes with this Rolex style flip lock clasp, which for the most part is okay. You do have some sharpness on the actual edges of the clasp, which is a known issue with Paganis. You do have some micro adjusts, but other than that, that's about it. And as I mentioned, that highly polished finishing. You do have solid end links. Fit and finish on the case, as you can tell, very tight and tidy indeed. You know, you can't say nothing else. Male links on the end link. Move over to the San Martin. Sorry, both have tapering as well, from a 20 down to a 16 at the clasp. Same thing. But again, fit and finish of the end link, fine. Male link. The nicer thing, of course, on this San Martin is the clasp. It's a very well done clasp, very well machined. Got 6 micro adjusts to make up for the absence of an actual dive extension. San Martin across the flip. Solid clasp. Very popular clasp. So in the bracelet game, you know, I'd assumed the San Martin will be really far ahead. It actually isn't. So, you know, objectively, between the two, there is no such clear-cut difference. So the actual San Martin scored only 1 point over there. The bracelet is absolutely fine in the Pagani. Like I said, it's a bit of sharpness there, but as a functioning bracelet, it's fine. You know, you'll have other concerns, like if the screws maybe lose the thread or they start coming out, etc. But you know, I've had same thing with the San Martins. I've had some screws on the same bracelet which are easy, they come out nicely, they go back in very smooth threads. Then I've had some which have been stuck. Case in point here. So there's a bit of damage to the screw because it was just, that's just the way it was. So there we have it, guys. We looked at the watch, and I am surprised, I will say. I thought there would be more of a difference considering such a price difference. And of course, you know, the hype around San Martin, but equally there's a great hype around Pagani. If you look at Pagani, they sell, especially that version, this Submariner version on the left of me, the 1661, they've sold over 3,500 orders. Compare that to San Martin, they've sold them, I think they've hit around 1,000. So yeah, both are very popular. Now let's look at the scores. Let's bring this together. Let's find out where the difference actually lies. So apologies if you can't read that, just the ISO settings on the camera. However, I'll take you to this, I'll summarize. So what do we do for the dial? Now, the only difference that I saw on the dial is actually the Lume. The Lume is a lot better. I'll put this away, it's a bit distracting. The Lume is so much better than it is on the Pagani. San Martin Lume steals the show on that one. But in terms of the application of indices, the detail on the dial, the printing, the quality, there's no difference between them. Even the dials, you know, this Pagani is a black sunburst style and this is the green one. You know, there's no difference within the dials. And those of you that mod out there, you'll know these dials are actually very cheap. And the only other thing which scored it another point was the fact that they used an applied logo. Whether or not you like the logo is a different point, but it's applied, it's added value to the dial. Whereas Pagani is just printed, but visually, again, it's a nice dial. The other bigger difference is, and I think the biggest difference here, you can see between the scores, was the actual bezel. It is that much better than it is on the Pagani. So the San Martin outperforms that. The bezel is really nice. The function is really nice. Solid, very good bezel overall. Pagani's, you know, bit loose, not as accurate, 60 clicks, etc. You know, but it sounds okay, and the fact that it rotates fine, there's no hot spots, that's got that going for it. Looking at the case, I really couldn't find much of a difference. Again, we've got a 1 point difference, absolutely negligible. And then we've got a bracelet comparison. Not much difference at all. Okay, now I'm thinking I might be right if I know my audience well. You're probably thinking, no way. Is that how little the difference is between both watches? Yes, sometimes we do. You know, these San Martins are very overhyped on YouTube. Yes, they are, but they are good. You know, they're excelling themselves time and time again. And you know, the Paganis, exactly, the Salmo. I think it's the more economic choice. It's a good beta, and it's overall very good watch. And I think with the package and all the extras, it's a watch that is difficult to criticize, and I find that myself. So let's tie up both things now. So the scores ultimately ended up being 16 for the Pagani and 22 for the San Martin. We've got we've got nearly £100 worth of difference between the price. So that's 55, that's 150. So just, you know, £95 difference in terms of value. So what does that tell you? So are you going to pay £95 more for a better bezel and slightly better lume and an addition on the clasp? And that's what you're paying for, 90 quid for all that. Now, if you can justify that, good for you. Then yes, you can say the San Martin's better value for money. I have to say on this one, the Pagani design clearly for me is the clear winner. It's £55, amazing value for money. It's actually not that far off the San Martin, but here's one thing to consider, just basic pure economics. How can Pagani do this? They buy them in the thousands, and therefore, you know, if you deal with China, if you notice on minimum order quantities, going from 300 to 500 makes a massive difference, and this likewise going from 500 to 1,000 pieces will significantly reduce your cost. Of course, San Martin are nowhere near those numbers. I'd say they still produce them in the hundreds. So until that, you know, they break that barrier, start ordering 5,000 of these pieces, then they'll be able to really bring the price down. But as it stands, that's how it is. And I think I'll leave the rest to you guys for your consideration. Which one would I go for? I probably would go for the San Martin because I do like a slightly more refined piece. I would like a better bezel, you know, but if I had to, I said I can happily live with the Pagani as well. So I've left the link for both watches in the description below. I hope you enjoyed this kind of thorough critical comparison, as I like to call it, just really breaking every element down on the watch. So thank you guys as always for watching, and I will see you on the next video.